I must say, it's no surprise that you and I would agree on this, but yeah, the right cure for obnoxious speech is to let it be aired so people can see what it actually is. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's very clear that this era in which censorship is back with a vengeance is also an era in which we are losing agreement on the most basic stuff, whether or not 2 + 2 = 4, whether or not men and women are different. Like we have lost the ability to agree on anything. And I think people do not fully appreciate the danger of that.
Yeah. No, it worries me. And yeah, I remember when people were saying, oh, well, when these students get to the real world, that'll straighten them out. And we were definitely saying from the very beginning, it's like, well, no, if there's enough of them, they'll change the real world into a very strange place. And what drives me nuts is that Haidt and I have people who are in charge of all sorts of different companies come to us and say, it's like, listen, we've got a crop from this elite school or these elite schools, and it's dysfunctional. Like things that used to be just interpersonal tensions have turned into immediately going to human resources. And then like almost complete paralyzation of some organizations. But they always say, but you can't say what organization this is. But it's going to bring organizations down. It probably already has. What happened at the New York Times with James Bennett, that was absolutely this dynamic. Definitely there were older people as well who were against him. But the whole dynamic of just the, if we can colorally make a strong argument that somehow this is, and of course they rhetorically use this is threatening our lives argument, which is the ultimate rhetorical card you can play, to get rid of a editor who was specifically hired to try to rock the boat back in 2016. It's this summer. I feel like the fever's starting to break a little bit, at least this current fever, and that maybe things aren't as illiberal and scary as they were maybe in say August. But it's going to come back at some point if we don't do something about it.
Well, it's going to come back, and a lot is riding on the election, and it's not clear that either path actually addresses the issue. Yeah. But so. Yeah, it's interesting that you see it as possibly the fever having broken. I certainly hope that's the case. I think we're in a great deal of danger. But
we are. Just I feel like there is at least some amount of pushback that I'm seeing where people aren't immediately getting fired for saying, what would have once been considered mildly controversial stuff.
Yeah. So you said it's going to bring down institutions. I think, if anything, you're being too cautious that at some level, the game theory is very, very clear. And to the extent that you have if you had universities with different commitments to wokeness, those that were woke would fail because they would be producing inferior graduates who were less capable of thinking clearly about all of the things that college is supposed to arm you to think about. But when every college does it, the point is everything downstream of those colleges is going to suffer those flaws, which means that the private sector firms that depend on those graduates will be hobbled relative to any presumably foreign competitors that aren't similarly hobbled. So effectively, you're looking at everything at the higher scales being jeopardized simultaneously, which ultimately means the nation will be rendered incapable of fending off its competitors abroad, which could restructure the way the whole planet functions. And frankly, it could restructure the level of commitment to liberty that the planet has, because the U.S. has been bedrock to that commitment to liberty.
Yeah, that's really funny you should say that, because that's exactly one of the things I'm working on an article about right now, about how just by having an increasing incidence of actual, papers being withdrawn and research really being seriously called into question at a time when higher education there's already a lot of skepticism about it, because people are realizing they can do this stuff online. They can do this. They can do this stuff at home, and it's ridiculously expensive. Why not do it in other places? And I think that the downstream effects of American higher education turning into something of a laughingstock, globally, will have very dire results for the community, the educational community, and well beyond, of course,
and well beyond, because at some level, even if you acknowledge, as you and I both did at the top of this discussion, that there is plenty of inequity in the U.S. and that it is not evenly distributed. The fact is, killing the goose that lays the golden eggs, even if those golden eggs are not evenly distributed, is going to be a loss for everyone. And you know who's going to lose worst? Are the most downtrodden people, the people who get the shaft every time. So, this is an incredibly foolish squandering of the power and position that we have, and it's not going to create a better world for anybody downstream of it.
Yeah. No, I am worried, to say the least. And I got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, which makes me all the more paranoid.
Yes, although that's young enough that maybe the dust will have settled and we'll be on to something smarter than this by the time you need to send them into the world.
Well, if something can't continue the way it's going, it won't.
Yeah, well, that's it's a very frightening thing you've just said, Greg. But